what happens if you accidentally put your hand in a particle accelerator? An unpleasant question, which unfortunately was answered in the negative in Vietnam in the inconceivable Hanoi incident. Be sure to stay with us until the end, because everything about this crazy story will blow you away, and we will also look at original footage. It will really be crazy, I promise. Welcome, folks. Today we are going to Vietnam, more precisely to the Hanoi Institute of Nuclear Physics. This institute had 2 particle accelerators, but in 1992 only one of them was still working. A gift from the Soviet Union from 1982, the so-called microtron MT-17, was an experimental model, and the manual was available exclusively in Russian. Doesn't sound like optimal conditions for safe operation, does it? On November 17th, 1992, a research team led by the Institute director Chan Duc Thiep, and I apologize for my Vietnamese pronunciation, conducted experiments with the accelerator. They irradiated gold ore samples with X-rays that the accelerator generated by shooting electrons at a tungsten target, a plate used as a target for the particles. There was actually a system that could have been used to exchange the samples remotely using compressed air. But since the first sample had to be changed after just 1 hour, the decision was made to exchange it manually, a fateful decision. After changing the first sample, the team placed the second sample in the irradiation room and then made their way to the control room. The director, however, asked an assistant for soap to wash his hands, and as he passed by, she told the operator in the control room that the experiment was ready and the accelerator could be switched on. But instead of going to the sink to wash his hands, the director went back to the irradiation room to adjust the position of the sample again. He adjusted it several times with blocks of wax, with his hands only a few centimeters from the tungsten. Without knowing it, he was already in the beam of the activated accelerator at that time. The assistant then noticed that the director was not outside at the sink and called for him. When there was no response, she ran to the irradiation room and found the door open. She called out again, but the noise of the generators and air conditioners was too loud. In a panic, she then ran to the control room and asked the operator to shut down the accelerator immediately. When she told the director that he had been in the beam for several minutes, he went very quiet. And here we come to the exciting question. What does a particle accelerator actually do to human tissue? Particle accelerators accelerate charged particles like electrons to nearly the speed of light. Particle accelerators bring charged particles such as electrons to almost the speed of light. Every one of you knows the formula E equals mc squared, but very few people know that this is only the simplified version. The complete formula is E squared equals m squared times CO4 plus p squared times c squared. The second part describes the momentum and only becomes relevant when an object approaches the speed of light. Then momentum dominates total energy and means that we would need an infinite amount of energy to reach exactly the speed of light. The MT-17 accelerator was able to accelerate the electrons to 99.9999% of the speed of light. These extremely high-energy electrons then collided with the tungsten target, thereby generating a beam of high-energy X-rays. This all sounds very scientific and dramatic, but was it really that bad? The director doesn't even feel anything here. Unfortunately, that is exactly the insidiousness of ionizing radiation. At first, you don't notice anything. That evening, the director rode home through the streets of Hanoi as usual on his motorcycle. His hands felt a bit strange, but he put it down to his rheumatoid arthritis. He went to work as usual for 8 days. A routine examination revealed nothing unusual, although he told the doctor about the incident, but then things went downhill. His hands turned gray, swelled up, and ached. Nevertheless, he waited another 2 weeks before finally visiting a specialist hospital on December 11th. The diagnosis was then clear. His hands were severely irradiated. What followed was a 600-day odyssey through various hospitals. Several skin grafts failed. In March 1993, the most severely damaged finger had to be amputated. The finger was then sent to a biophysical laboratory in Moscow for research purposes. A macabre but somehow important decision because you don't often get the opportunity to examine radiation-damaged human tissue. 159 days after the accident, the director was transferred to a hospital in Paris. There, another finger was amputated, and the right hand was surgically sewn into the director's abdomen, hoping to prevent infection, stimulate tissue growth, and ultimately save the hand. Unfortunately, the attempt failed, and on July 9, 1993, the entire right hand had to be amputated at the wrist. The left hand initially seemed to recover, but in October, necrosis returned. The fourth and fifth fingers also had to be amputated. And after 600 days, the director was finally discharged from the hospital with only a partially functioning hand. A truly tragic story, which inevitably raises the question of how it could have come to this. The investigations by the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, revealed numerous serious safety deficiencies. The institute had no trained radiation protection personnel. There were no automatic safety systems that would have prevented the accelerator from being turned on with the door open. The irradiation times were not controlled electronically, but incredibly, were timed with a wristwatch. It was relied upon that the employees would verbally keep track of each other when someone entered the irradiation room. Even the cable ducts and ventilation shafts were poorly constructed and allowed radiation to escape freely to the outside. The radiation dose in the control room was 5 times higher than in the ghost town of Pripyat, which is only 3 kilometers from the damaged Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So every employee of the Federal Institute for Occupational Safety would have gone absolutely crazy there. Incredible that the radiation exposure of the employees was never measured. Well, actually not that incredible, because the institute simply did not have the necessary measuring devices. Vietnam was an absolute developing country at that time and had to cope with very limited resources. The IAEA concluded that such an accident was inevitable sooner or later under these circumstances. The safety standard was so low that it is actually a miracle that nothing happened earlier. After the accident, basic safety measures were finally introduced. The door to the irradiation room was secured with a magnetic locking system and a padlock. Warning signals and emergency shutdowns were installed. But the real scandal is that it took such a tragic incident before these absolute minimum standards were implemented. And it is particularly bitter that the scientists at the institute were highly qualified. The director was an experienced physicist, but without adequate resources, training, and regulatory oversight, even the best personnel could not prevent one of the worst accidents with a particle accelerator. As so often, it was not the physics or the technology itself that led to human suffering. It was human misconduct, a lack of time, and the assumption that if you feel nothing, then nothing has happened. Today, particle accelerators are safer than ever. There are 30,000 of these fascinating machines in use around the world in industry, medicine, and research. Most of them are used to irradiate tumors, thereby helping millions of patients. But the Hanoi incident reminded us that we must never lose respect for the power of this technology, and that the next time someone from the occupational safety department bothers you at the office,
you might be able to show a little more understanding.
To stay updated on exciting stories from the world of science in the future, subscribe to the channel now, and now we travel to a significantly safer particle accelerator. And that's CERN in Switzerland. Truly incredible things are happening here. Some are already talking about the fact that we have discovered a whole new physics. You can find out everything about the revolutionary breakthroughs at CERN in the video displayed at the top right. Be sure to check it out. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to check out the other videos. There are still many exciting topics. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, guys.